Good evening. There's breaking news from President Joe Biden, who's overseas, about what he thinks are the consequences of his predecessor's hold on the Republican Party and the fascinating and very public back and forth he's having with Russia's President Vladimir Putin before the two meet face to face in less than 2 days. Ahead of that meeting, the president today talked about the threats to democracies around the world, sometimes from within, and what he called phony populism.
Prove to the world and to our own people that democracy can still prevail against the challenges of our time and deliver for the needs of our people. We have to root out corruption that siphons off our strength, guard against those who would stoke hatred and division for political gain, this phony populism.
Biden would return to that phrase, phony populism, just minutes later while delivering a blunt reply to a reporter's question about allies who may still be rattled by the Capitol riot and the hold the former president still has on his party.
It is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism has happened. And it is disappointing that so many of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, who I know better, have been reluctant to take on, for example, an investigation because they're worried about being primaried.
The president also gave his assessment of what he sees as the current political calculus, that the Republican Party is, quote, vastly diminished in numbers, end quote. Also that party leadership is, in his words, fractured. But while the president spends much of his days with allies, sources tell CNN his mornings are spent in preparation for his meeting Wednesday in Switzerland with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Just another of the many differences between how this president and the predecessor handled their duties in office. Also different, the importance that President Biden placed on the survival of human rights in other countries. In this case, Russian dissident Alexei Navalny.
Navalny's death would be another indication that Russia has little or no intention of abiding by basic, fundamental human rights. It would be a tragedy. It would do nothing but hurt his relationships with the rest of the world, in my view, and with me.
While the words the president used may be striking commentary, it is imagery from the meeting that may send the greater message, embracing allies, strengthening old bonds, talking up the importance and the history of the NATO alliance. And again, a far different scene than we saw with the previous president, who also, months into office, shoved past the prime minister of a small European country at a meeting of NATO, sending an unmistakable message to allies and adversaries alike. I'm joined now by our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. So it's hard to oversee just how different all of this seems. I mean, the United States' role in NATO, President Biden warning about phony populism, as he called it, his criticism of Vladimir Putin. I'm wondering what the reaction has been among U.S. allies.
The reaction has been exceptionally positive from those 29 other NATO member states. The Spanish Prime Minister calling Joe Biden's election an inspiration, saying that he's starting to deliver on some of what he promised. The Secretary General of NATO saying in a very sort of typical Scandinavian understated way that it felt very different from how it did under President Trump, who, of course, was frequently denigrating NATO. President Biden making it very clear today that the U.S.'s commitment to the Northern Atlantic Treaty was, in his words, unshakable, rock solid, that mutual defense treaty, Article 5, as well, was a sacred obligation. So a lot of people very pleased to hear that, Anderson.
Also, talk more, if you can, about what President Biden revealed and didn't reveal tonight about how he is approaching the summit with Putin.
So he said that he doesn't want to telegraph to the world's media exactly what his strategy is in terms of negotiating with President Putin. But he did also seem to be sort of laying down the gauntlet or making it very clear certain key issues that he would be raising with the Russian president that he already knows are going to ruffle feathers. And particularly, of course, I'm talking about Alexei Navalny, who you mentioned, the Russian opposition leader who was poisoned with Novichok back in August, who has been sentenced to 2.5 years years in a Russian penal colony. In an interview with NBC News, President Putin said he didn't really have any way of guaranteeing whether Navalny lives or dies while he's in custody. You heard there President Biden's response to that, vowing to really hold feet to the fire and make it clear to President Putin that if he wants to be part of the international community, he needs to abide by international norms.
Is there any indication that Putin cares what the U.S. thinks when it comes to Navalny or cyber hacks or ransomware or anything, really?
I don't think there's an indication that he cares what the U.S. thinks, but he is very strategic and very shrewd, President Putin. And he certainly, I believe, does not want to see this relationship deteriorate further. It's been very costly for Russia, particularly this last raft of sanctions. And so I do think that that's part of why both leaders are having this summit, that they do believe there are certain avenues, limited and narrow though they might be in scope, where potentially the two countries could work together, collaborate on these issues that would hopefully prevent a further degradation of the relationship. I don't think anyone's expecting anything hugely positive to come out of it in terms of tangible deliverables, but the hope is it will avert a crisis.
Clarissa Ward, I appreciate it. Thank you.